This is the Get Published podcast, sponsored by Brodie Consulting Group. To get more information about our coaching and publishing services, go to getpublishedpodcast.com. Hello, I am Paul Brodie, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Get Published podcast, where we help authors get published with a proven system that works. Today, we're being joined by Nicholas Stuller, author of The Truth Shall Set Your Wallet Free. Nicholas, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Paul. Great to be here.
And you can tell I love your book title. I had a great time saying that.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And the subtitle is Secrets to Finding Your Perfect Financial Advisor. So it's all about bashing myths that prevent people from getting the professional help that they need, regardless of how little money they have or how much money they have or how good they are at buying stocks low and selling them high. So that's the whole thesis of the book, is to help anyone, regardless of income or assets or experience level, improve their financial lives with getting the right financial advisor.
Excellent. You ready to start with our questions?
Terrific.
All right, let's get started. Question number 1. What is the one piece of advice that you would give to a first-time author who is currently writing their book?
I think the best piece of advice is even though you've started writing your book, do a lot of research on how other first-time authors did it. And that's what I did, and there's a wealth of information, and it's very comforting to read about how others have done it, whether they've hired a consultant or they have a co-author or whatever the things that you learn. But, I've never written a book before. I'm an avid reader, and I'm an avid researcher, and I am slightly smart enough to know what I don't know. So I knew nothing about how to write a book, so I just did an awful lot of research and spent really weeks and months, in fact, researching until I got enough information to feel comfortable about how to go about, writing a book as a first-time author and employing various resources to help me, because there's no way I could have done it completely by myself. And so that was very comforting to get information and triangulate all this different information to come to a conclusion on how to get my book done.
It's essentially like, if you don't know, now you know.
Exactly. It's a very unique thing. The industry is unlike any other industry I've read about, and I've been in business a long time, and I know lots of entrepreneurs and business people, and the publishing industry is unique and it is different. And so there is very much a science to, and a pattern for how you can get published as a first-time author, and it is not intuitive. It may be once you get all this information and you think back and say, oh wow, that's obvious, but in some cases it's not obvious. And so I needed an education, and otherwise I would have spun my wheels. And I know other people who have written a book, and in my view, they made the mistake of just writing the book, and in the hopes that somebody would find it and they'd have an audience. And they wrote the book and they have one copy, and they're very unhappy that they spent all this time and they like what they wrote, but no one sees it because they didn't know what to do. And they only focused on writing the book, and there are many other things you need to do in order to, get it out there and get people to actually enjoy, the fruits of your labor.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And one of the conversations that I have with prospective clients is, what they want to get out the book, where do they see the book? And those that ended up working with me ends up typically very well for them, at minimum a #1 bestseller, and they're a lot of the time able to leverage that and build their business. But I do have other people that don't go with the coaching, and they launch the book the way they think they should do it, and I refer to it as disappearing into the Amazon rainforest, because you have so many books on Amazon, they control the market, and when you don't launch it correctly, it literally disappears into a rainforest.
Yeah, that's I've read about that, and Yeah, that's not hard to imagine. There's an awful lot of books out there. And yeah, that rings very true, but sad for those that really don't, get any help at all.
Absolutely. Well, this is going to transition nicely into our second question, and that is, what do you feel is the hardest part about getting published?
Well, for me, based upon the kind of book that I wanted to write and the audience's plural that I wanted for the book, for me, I needed to get an agent, a literary agent, and that was the hardest, part of the entire process. And so, and I read that is also, for others, that's a very hard part of the process. So, again, I did a lot of research, and it took quite a bit of work, but I did get an agent. I got offers from 3 different agents. I was very fortunate to get that, and I chose the one that I felt was the best for me. It turned out that indeed I made a good decision, thankfully, and but that was the hardest part. I mean, I will say, writing the book was an awful lot of effort, obviously, and some of my chapters, because some of the book is fairly technical, was a lot of hard work and effort. But in terms of, in the grand scheme of things, the hardest part was getting an agent, because without that, then just the odds of it being picked up by a publisher diminish, and then obviously the odds of it being read diminish, and it just follows along. As a first-time author, it just follows along that line of thinking. So getting an agent was the hardest part, but once I got one, then things really started to happen. It didn't happen overnight, but they definitely happened.
Okay, let's talk about marketing. Please share a marketing strategy that you have used in your book launch that has worked well.
Sure. So what I've been doing, because the book launches, it technically gets released in a couple months from now, but I've already made a number of sales, pre-orders, on Barnes & Noble and Amazon and others, friends and other people that I've met have, emailed me the receipts. And so, people have bought a dozen copies, so it's been very gratifying. But probably one of the more productive marketing strategies is writing for the industry trade journals in which I am in. So that's because that gets me the audience I want, and if someone, in my opinion, if someone's writing a book that is not going to be at least partially consumed by a trade audience, write for some organization that is germane to your subject matter, and there's obviously places where people congregate online about any topic and every topic, and so writing for an article, or what have you, or sharing a snippet of a part of a chapter with a group that has an audience made up of your potential buyers, that works. And it's worked well for me, and I'll continue to do that, all throughout the next year. So it's been very productive.
Could you share how exactly readers could potentially go out there, first-time authors, how they can actually reach out to these trade journals and potentially do an article? What's the process involved in that?
Yeah, that's a great question. The best way is you actually reach out to the editor or a journalist that works for one of these journals. But you have to be persistent and patient, because sometimes they won't even reply to you. But when they have a deadline or there's a need, if your name rings a bell, then they'll say, you know what? There's a piece I've been wanting to write, and this person's been paying me once a month for the last, 7 months. I have a gap. I need a quote, and then there you go. They'll take you up, and then once you develop a relationship, then then you've got a relationship. So, in one case, there's an editor I've known for over 20 years, so that was relatively easy. and fast. In another case, somebody that was really new to me introduced me to another editor who didn't know me at all, but I knew of them, and I simply reached out, and they published my piece, and it worked out great. And then I've had others, a number of others that simply have not even replied, and that's okay. It's not, I don't take it personally. So reaching out to a journalist or an editor, and saying, I've got some interesting things to say about a particular topic, gives you pretty good odds of being picked up. And obviously, the more experience you have on a particular topic, the better it is. If you have absolutely no history in a particular topic, that can be much harder. But not impossible either. I witness in my industry relatively young folks who have only been in the industry a few years, but have a very interesting perspective, and I see them getting picked up and quoted, and then there begins their process of building up an audience. So, but yeah, just reaching out to the editors and the journalists and developing a relationship, and it will work. It may take a little bit of time, but it'll definitely work eventually.
And Nicholas, you also mentioned that your book's out in a few months. So right now you're doing a pre-order strategy. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Could you tell us a little bit more about that and what the process entails?
Sure. I did a lot of research on the optimal way to do that, and there's many different tactics for a pre-order, plan. I'm doing two things right now, which seem to be working. One is I am making a donation out of my author proceeds from all books sold for only the pre-order period to this particular foundation that is well known in my industry. So it's a foundation I've known for a long time. I've supported them, and that's people are aware of that. I've had an affinity for this group, and so. But for every book sold between now and the release date in a couple of months' time, I'm going to donate a fixed dollar amount out of author proceeds to versus publisher proceeds, because those are two different things. So, but out of my proceeds, a fixed dollar amount for every book sold to this foundation. So that's one tactic I'm using. And then another tactic I'm using, and I've already seen traction on that. I've seen people, respond, thank you, it's nice of you, and so that is, I've proven that is working. And it's also not my idea. This is an idea, I've researched and read about. Another one is, which is more consumer oriented, because my book has both a industry use and a consumer use. So on more of a consumer-oriented approach, anyone that pre-orders, I will within 24 hours send them the first 2 chapters of the book. So the book is completely done. It's being formatted as we speak, but the manuscript is in final format. So for anyone that pre-orders, I will send them within 24 hours the first 2 chapters of the book, so they can get a taste of what it's like right now. And that is a tactic I have read that is effective. I don't see any evidence of it working for me yet, but it's still. I just started doing this, the pre-order work, probably 2 weeks or so ago. I've seen one tactic bear fruit, the other not yet, but I think it will work. We'll see. That's what marketing is all about. It's all about testing. So hopefully that continues. That second tactic will show some proof of return on the effort.
Excellent. Well, let's talk about your favorite book. So what is your favorite book, and what was the number one thing that you learned from it?
Yeah, there's a lot of books I really enjoy, but the one that I continually think about and use and enjoy because it has so many utilities in life, not just in literature, is a book called StrengthsFinder by Tom Rath. And it's basically a book that teaches the opposite of modern psychology, of the modern psychological concept of in society, people say, if you're not good at something, you should work harder to be good at it. And the whole concept of StrengthsFinder is the opposite. That if you're not inherently good at something, avoid it like the plague, run the other way, find the things that you are good at, and just focus your time on those things. You'll be happier, you'll be more successful in the endeavor. And it's actually a whole coursework, and major companies, employ this tactic. And I read the Wall Street Journal bestsellers business list every week, and StrengthsFinder is in the top 10. They have been every week for years, plural. And it's just a really, what's the word? It's an unburdening feeling to say, okay, I don't have to be good at calculus, but I'm really good at grammar, whatever the case may be. And so this book is actually a test. It tells you what your top strengths are. And it says you should only spend time on your top 5 strengths. And if you're really horrible at math, and that's number 29, you really shouldn't go into engineering or mathematically, oriented jobs. So it's a book that I'm looking at a couple of copies of it. I used to give it out to employees. I talk about it and I reflect upon it, and it's just a terrific, book that has a lot of parallels in life in general, not just in writing or in business. So that's one that really sticks out for me.
Excellent. And what is your favorite quote and why?
Probably my favorite quote is, "No one remembers Babe Ruth struck out more than any other ball player of his time. They only remember his home runs." And the moral of that is, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to make a lot of mistakes. And so what? And you kind of need to. And when I tell people that this saying that, somebody told me, and people go, "Wow, I had no idea." Yeah, of course you don't. And boy, he has failed a lot. He did fail a lot by measure of strikes. He succeeded by measure of home runs. So, and other athletes talk about this, and other people in business talk about this. But in life, you're going to make mistakes. You have to. If you're not making enough effort. So don't let the strikes get you down. And so that's why I like that saying, because when you're not feeling good about yourself, or you're stuck on a chapter, like there's a couple of chapters I was stuck on 6 or 8 months ago, or making my 115th outbound email to literary agents with not one yet returning my email. I just reflect on that. That's actually true. I had to reach out to 117 literary agents, and then I started getting. I eventually got the replies. I reflect upon that fact, and it makes you feel better about making the effort.
All right, Nicholas, well, I want to thank you for being a guest on the show. What is the best way for people to find you online?
Right now, today, the best way is on LinkedIn. I have all about me on my LinkedIn profile, and a lot about my book, and a lot about my what I'm doing is on LinkedIn under Nicholas Stuller.
All right, Nicholas, so I want to thank you once again for being a guest on the show, and I wish you all the best in your author journey ahead.
Thanks so much, Paul. Great to be here. Appreciate it.
Thanks again for joining us today. To learn more about how to get your book published with a proven system that works, grab a free copy of my book at getpublishedpodcast.com.